Massaman Curry might be the world's best food. I mean, it's not just us who say that, it was literally given that title not once, but twice. And that was not a controversial choice. But that might be the only thing about Massaman Curry that isn't controversial. This is a dish whose origins have been claimed by kingdoms, countries, and cultures from all across the world. And everyone has evidence, proof that Massaman belongs to them. But only one can be right. So today we're diving into the deepest rabbit hole in Thai cuisine, descending into the delicious madness of the most complicated story we've ever covered, and obviously enjoying every minute of the process. All right, before we dive in, let me quickly explain to you why researching Massaman Curry is such a mess. Now, I want you to imagine that there was like a map over my shoulder, like we were one of those YouTube channels that had an animation budget. Anyway, on this map, there is no need for national borders, but what there is are things like ingredients, endemic stuff that comes from different regions. And then you can put in on the map cooking techniques that developed in certain places, like, for example, stir-frying in China or the signature spice blends of India. Now imagine this map starting to move. Things going from place to place with wars and invasions, religious conversions, trade routes like the Spanish galleon or the Silk Road, all carrying with them ingredients and recipes, moving those pins on the map, turning the pins into lines and arrows to follow, and then as those lines cross and intersect, well, that's food. I mean, that's what cuisine is. This map explains almost every single dish on Earth and everything that we've ever covered here on OTR. But then there's Massaman Curry. I guess we should start by explaining what the dish is. At its core, it's a curry, a traditional Indian technique incorporating a blend of spices, though in this case, the spices are ground into a paste which is classically Siamese. The ingredients in that spice blend combine Thai staples, lemongrass, galangal, and shrimp paste, along with Indian aromatics like cinnamon and cardamom. Then there's Indonesian cloves and nutmeg, chili peppers from across the ocean, and even cumin, the flavor of Central Asia. And that's just the paste. Once that's done, the next step is to cook it in coconut milk until it separates, just like the curries of Kerala or Malaysia. And then to add in Thai or Chinese fish sauce, New World potatoes and peanuts, and meat, always chicken, beef, or mutton because it has to be halal, no pork allowed. Put it all together and what you end up with is pretty much a greatest hits of the entire planet. A luxurious and rich stew packed with flavor and the kind of thing that you can smell from a block away. This indescribable combination of Christmas morning, the markets of Mumbai, and Southeast Asia's coastal tropics. It's incredible. And no wonder it is again a two-time winner of the world's best food. Massaman Curry is a Thai dish. But it doesn't look like any other Thai curry, and even here in the kingdom, the only thing about Massaman that everyone agrees on is that it comes from somewhere else. But where? There are three main theories, and they all point to wildly different points of origin, from the Persian Gulf to the Mekong Delta. And the timeline's a mess, too, with the best guesses covering a range of almost 2,000 years. And the craziest thing is, all of these theories make sense. They're all supported by compelling evidence, and even on that map, they all work, which is not supposed to happen. Now, let me warn you, if you clicked on this video hoping for some light entertainment to watch us wandering around Thailand and just eating a bunch of Massaman Curry like, man, this is great, well, this video might not be for you. This is going to get intense. But if you're ready to dive deep down one of the craziest rabbit holes in the entire world of food, to end up buried in old legends and conspiracy theories and wild flukes of history, well, all right, buckle up. And if you are going to come along, well, the only place to start is right at the sunrise, with a plate of southern Thailand's most iconic breakfast. Around 200 years ago, a group of Muslims from Thailand's southern border built a mosque along a canal in what was then the southwest corner of Bangkok. Today, this city's grown up all around the neighborhood of Suan Luang, but here, hidden from the main road, things have pretty much remained the same. From the quiet pace to the old wooden houses to the smell of spices stewing in big pots just after sunrise. At the center of the alley, just 100 meters away from that original mosque, there's a small shop that's legendary in just this one hidden community, the local king of Southern Thai-style roti and Massaman Curry. You remember when you and I did our multi-day Massaman roti curry crawl in the south via motorbike. You'll find it in a lot of different ways. Every cook has their own method of preparing it. Some are thicker, some are thinner, some are spicier. Most of them are not particularly spicy. This has a little touch of heat, but you know, generally what you're going to get is something that to be eaten with roti. So it's going to be thin, you know, dip the bread in with these really nice sort of braised chunks of beef that just fall apart when you take a bite. So good. So I think as a foreigner coming to Thailand, one of the biggest surprises for me is that Massaman curry was so hard to find. Like, that was my favorite Thai dish overseas. And so I remember coming to Thailand and just being like every restaurant looking for Massaman, and I was surprised why I couldn't find it on the menu. And you really don't see Massaman curry in Thailand outside of, you know, restaurants with English menus meant for foreigners or like the most exclusive Thai restaurants, except in the South. And in the South, this is just an everyday breakfast staple. Roti and Massaman curry, typically with beef. That's what we have here. And I think in Bangkok, this is, you know, and I know you hear me say this a lot, this is the best in the city. The south of Thailand is unique in its love for Massaman. In this form, it's a morning staple, especially here in the part of the country from the Malay border to around Phuket. That region has long been assumed to be the home of Massaman. I mean, that's where it's served every day, there and nowhere else. And it's not just assumed. Well, there's an actual origin story, and this is how it goes. At the southern tip of Thailand, in the 4 provinces along the border, well, that's where you see Massaman at almost every house and restaurant. And those 4 provinces once made up the majority of a kingdom called Pattani. Now, Pattani, according to legend, was established by a Siamese prince around the middle of the 15th century. He built a palace and declared himself ruler, but soon, well, he fell terribly ill. As he lay dying, he was visited by a Muslim cleric from Sumatra who somehow healed the prince. And in response to this miracle, the prince renounced his Buddhist faith, converted to Islam, and took on a new name, Sultan Ismail Shah. Now, this sultanate was not the first part of the Malay Peninsula to become Muslim. It was the second, long after the famous trading hub of Malacca. But in 1511, Malacca would be defeated by the Portuguese, who would outlaw the Islamic faith and expel the many overseas Muslims from their new colony. Well, many of those Muslims were traders who relied on Malacca to export their goods and spices to Southeast Asia, and needing a new port, they'd turn their attention north to Pattani. By the middle of the 16th century, Pattani was firmly established as a new commercial powerhouse, and that was just in time for the emergence of the greatest Muslim trading empire in the entire world, on the other side of the Andaman Sea. In 1556, Akbar the Great would consolidate Muslim rule over the Indian subcontinent, allying with the Persians and restoring a kingdom founded by his grandfather, known to history as the Mughal Empire. As their entry point to the Southeast Asian market, the Mughals would build extremely close ties to Patani, bringing wealth and immigrants and lots of food traditions. And Patani would remain linked in culture and finance to Muslim India until the year 1786, when Patani was defeated and annexed by Siam. Now, that date, 1786, is the key to this entire story, because that's pretty much exactly the same time as Bangkok was founded as the new Siamese capital. In fact, only 4 years after Rama I took power and moved the palace across the river from Thonburi. Here's why that matters. This is Thonburi and this is Bangkok, and in the 1780s, many people would move from the west side of the river to the east. That left a lot of Thonburi houses and neighborhoods abandoned, and after Siam annexed Patani, well, thousands of southern Muslims would move north, looking for work or in a lot of cases brought by force to dig canals and work the land. Now, many of those Patani Muslims would move into a vacated part of Thonburi where a mosque stood, the biggest one on the west side of the river. That mosque, by the way, is still standing, called the Bang Luang Mosque. Now, before the kingdom had moved, this was an affluent area, the home to Muslim nobility and right around the corner from Bangkok Yai, home to Thonburi's most prestigious noble houses. One of those houses belonged to the family of a young Siamese noblewoman, still a teenager in 1786, and her name was Princess Bunrod. Let's jump ahead 14 years. Princess Bunrod is now the lover of the heir to the Siamese throne, soon to become his wife and modern Thailand's second queen, Sri Suryendra. Anyway, all of this might seem tangential, except in the year 1800, the crown prince would write a poem to Princess Bunrod, expressing his love to her through flowery metaphors about food. This is what we now call the verse of food and dessert, and it's in that poem where we find the first mention ever of Massaman Curry.
แกงไก่มัสมั่นเนื้อนพคุณพี่เอ๋ยหอมยี่รารสชุนเฉียบร้อน
So basically, I know that's pretty complicated, so let me sum this up. The theory goes like this. As a teenager growing up in Bangkok Yai, the princess had encountered massaman brought by Patani migrants, and she was so entranced that she learned the recipe herself. That's why in the poem it's made clear that she didn't just love the dish, but she knew how to cook it. And after she became the queen, massaman would be served in the royal palace, which is why we see two very different forms of massaman depending on where we are. Or maybe those two forms aren't even as different as it looks at first glance. Because while the version we just tried might feel like a humble street food, not something fit for a princess, well, when we track down the oldest forms of southern massaman served in Bangkok, it's not actually that humble at all. It's luxurious, royal even. So for our next meal, well, we need to visit a fourth-generation street cart run by a family here since the fall of Patani.
มีใบกะวานแล้วก็เม็ดแล้วก็ลูกกะวานแล้วก็มีคิงซอยมันฝรั่งแล้วก็กะทิแล้วก็มีน้ำตาลแล้วก็เกลือแล้วก็มันจะออกรสชาติเปรี้ยวๆหวานๆแล้วก็มันจะมีถั่วลิสง แล้วก็ตอนทำต้องเคี่ยวพริกแกงให้มันแตกมันแล้วก็ถึงได้ใส่เครื่องปรุง
There's so much depth of flavor. This is ridiculous how good this is. Like, it's, God, how do you even describe this? It has some heat. You know, you think of Massaman as a sweet curry. This has some heat because it's still Southern Thai. Peanut, coconut. Daria, I'm going to save the potatoes for you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, it's like rich and satisfying and just full of these amazing, bold flavors that is such a component of the food of the South. And here it's not served with roti, it's served with biryani. So let's try it. It's just one of the, this is like, silly how good this is. You know, it's a thin gravy that's almost like what you'd expect in Bangkok from a green curry, and I'm wearing the wrong color shirt to keep splashing curry all over myself, so I'm gonna stop talking and focus on eating.
You are crazy.
Let's clean up. Ah, delicious. All right, so that's pretty much it for theory number one. Massaman curry developed in Patani inspired by Mughal Indian traders. It was brought to Bangkok in 1786 when Patani fell to Siam and would be first recorded just a few years later in reference to a princess who'd grown up right next to a Patani neighborhood. It's compelling. For one thing, it explains why the recipe is more Indian than any other Thai food. It explains why it's so common in that one specific region. It accounts for all those spices from all those places which would have been common in the old trading port. And the timeline fits perfectly with the first written record of Massaman curry. But hold on. Anyone who watches enough courtroom dramas on television will recognize that this is a circumstantial case. There's no actual evidence to support any of this, just a bunch of things that could have happened. But there is one way to test this theory, and that's to follow all of the paths taken by Patani Muslims, not just the one leading to Bangkok. After 1786, most of the migrants from that old kingdom actually headed south, not north, into Malaysia, which is, of course, a Muslim country. It would make sense that those migrants would have brought Massaman with them too if it actually came from Patani, so we'll need to track down some Malaysian-style curry, served not with roti but with Nasi Lemak, coconut rice, that country's national dish. What I'm interested in is understanding the everyday, again, this is not a restaurant made for foreigners. This is for the Malay workers in this neighborhood. This is a very, very down-to-earth kind of restaurant, serving authentic Malaysian food. And which is why I'm having my third coffee of the day, because I can't turn down a kopi susu. What I'm interested in though is the notes of the Massaman. How does that compare with the classic everyday Malaysian curry? And this is spicier, but yeah, otherwise you can see the progression, you can see the relationship, let's say. Ooh, it's actually a lot spicier. But otherwise we have the potatoes, we have the chicken, we have that rich, coconutty broth of all those amazing aromatics and spices. And then we have chili, a fair bit of chili. Sometimes I forget how much Malaysian people can tolerate heat. I get lulled into a false sense of security, because Thai Malay food is rich and comforting and aromatic and delicious. And I forget that things that look the same in Malaysia might be just fiery and yeah, this is not your Bangkok style Nasi Lemak, but it's so good.
All right, now in a normal OTR video, this is where the narrative would end. We could just say, all right, Southern Thai Muslim food, end of story, let's go eat some awesome Massaman. Except as you can probably guess, that's not how this is gonna go. Because just like in that courtroom TV drama, there's always some shocking piece of actual evidence that turns up and turns everything that we thought we knew on its head. And in the case of Massaman Curry, well, the documentation, the closest thing that we have to proof, well, that does show up, and it doesn't point to Patani at all. Now, this time it takes us 6,000 kilometers away to what we now call the country of Iran. And believe it or not, it's this story, not the one we just covered, that's the most popular with Thai scholars, famous chefs, and reputable historians and YouTube researchers. So let's dive into the second possibility, this time starting around the year 1590. All right, before the construction of Bangkok, before the Thonburi Kingdom, the capital of Siam was the city of Ayutthaya. Now, today we remember Ayutthaya as a gilded metropolis of trade and commerce, but it wasn't always that way. In fact, for much of the 16th century, the city was in shambles, occupied by the Burmese and ravaged by a smallpox epidemic. This would start to change in the last decade of the 1500s when the Siamese king Naresuan oversaw a miraculous recovery, thanks in large part to his decision to revitalize the economy by opening the doors to foreign traders. This would be the start of Ayutthaya's long golden age, and the time period when Siam became a true global melting pot. At the height of King Naresuan's reign, a merchant from Persia named Ahmad Komi would make the long journey east to seek his own fortune. And Sheikh Ahmad would find Siam much to his liking. He'd set up a trading business, marry a local woman, learn to speak Thai, and before long, well, he found himself not just exceedingly wealthy, but mixing with the very top of Siamese society. Now, there's no record, not even speculation, about how Sheikh Ahmad would become a trusted advisor to the Thai royal family, but we know that by the 1610s, the new king Songtam would appoint Ahmad as a top government official, first as the overseer of Siam's Muslims, and later as the minister in charge of all foreigners in the kingdom. Now, through this title, Sheikh Ahmad would steer a great deal of trade away from Europe and towards Persia, in no small part because the Europeans were making plenty of enemies through religious conversions and a disastrous naval battle between the Portuguese and Dutch, in which a Thai ship was sunk in the crossfire. The Persians would become perhaps Siam's greatest allies for much of the 17th century. By the time of Sheikh Ahmad's death in 1631, he'd risen to the position of the king's top advisor, and this prestige would convey to his descendants, with his son the Minister of Affairs to Narai the Great, and his ancestors, the Bunnag family, remaining so closely tied to the royal court that one member even served as the king regent, the de facto head of state, for the teenage Rama V. It was around that time, in the middle of the 1800s, when another Bunnag descendant, himself the Minister of Education, would marry a woman known as Lady Pleon, who was perhaps the kingdom's first true celebrity chef. Now, let me pause for just a second because Lady Pleon deserves some recognition in her own right. This was a fascinating person, a pioneer in medicine who founded the Thai Red Cross Society, a renowned artisan who won an American award as the world's best embroiderer, and the creator of some of the most incredibly artistic foods that are still served in the royal palace. But where she enters this story is with her 1889 publication of the first Thai cookbook. Now, unlike Rama II's poem, which named dishes but didn't go into detail, here we find the first published recipe of Massaman Curry. And Lady Pleon didn't just write the ingredients. She explained in detail that Massaman Curry was a Persian dish
brought to Siam by Sheikh Ahmad himself. Now, all right, I know what you're thinking. Of course, the first person to write about one of Thailand's most beloved dishes would claim credit for their own family. I mean, that's common sense. But over the years, as more and more research was done into the dish, well, we find a ton that backs up her story. Let's start with the recipe itself. Now, it's true that her book was the first published version of Massaman, but that doesn't mean it was the first put in writing. And that's because there's an old Thai tradition of writing a cookbook in honor of the dead. Memorial books meant to keep someone's memory alive through their favorite foods. And time after time, as old funeral cookbooks are discovered, we see an interesting pattern. Massaman Curry, over and over in the books belonging to the Bunnag family, and nobody else. And that's not all. You might have noticed in the whole section about Patani, we didn't say anything about the word Massaman. And that's because that name isn't Thai or Malay. But it does sound an awful lot like Musliman, which is the Persian word for Muslim, as in Muslim curry. In the late 1670s, a Persian ambassador to Siam wrote that Narai the Great was a lover of Persian cuisine, and noted that it wasn't just Sheikh Ahmad's son working in the king's palace, but a large number of Persian chefs who cooked in the royal kitchen. And one more fact worth mentioning. Well, let's remember that by the time of Sheikh Ahmad, Persia was a close partner of India's Mughal Empire. In fact, the two kingdoms were so close that they shared an official language. They shared a code of laws, and they shared recipes, with food pinballing back and forth between the two empires so commonly that there was basically no line of distinction between royal Indian and royal Persian cuisine. In other words, it makes absolutely perfect sense why a Persian with power in Thailand, who brought his own cooks to the palace, would be serving a curry given a Persian name and passed down through the Bunnag family. And that brings us to our next meal. Welcome to Ruen Urai, a fine dining Thai restaurant in a restored 200-year-old teak wood house, run by Tom Vitayakul, the second-generation owner and a food historian in his own right, cultivating a menu showcasing the best of old Thai cuisine. Here at Ruen Urai, the cooks prepare 3 versions of Massaman Curry. The classic versions of beef and chicken, and another one made with a braised lamb shank and said to resemble probably the first versions served of the dish. Why is it that this is a dish that connects so much with foreigners? This was when I first came to Thailand, I was like looking for Massaman because that was what, living in the US, living in Hong Kong, that was Massaman. That was my...
The answer is comfort food. Another answer is, like many curries and many stews that we know and like from all over the world, this is umami ball. It's amalgam of flavors, like I said. It's combination of sweet, sour, saltiness, savory, and spiciness. And also, it's rich. It has the meat, it has all the elements that it's a meal in itself. Almost a meal in itself. As you know, it's often mentioned in history of Thai food. And as you know, Thai food, like Thai art and culture, is an amalgam of, it's a combination of many things. Some of them we own it outright, and some of them we adapt, we borrow, and we develop them into our own. So if you look at Thai art from the history and food, it's the same. This is Muslim dish. Could be from Persia, could be from Malay, but it's not our own. As you know by the name, you know by the ingredients, and it becomes part of the whole gamut of Thai cuisine, which is very interesting. Make our cuisine so rich and flavorful, just like life here in Bangkok.
Now, when Tom went to work building his restaurant, he found himself, just like us, pulled into the rabbit hole of the origins of Massaman Curry. And while he was convinced by the story of Sheikh Ahmad, there was one lingering question, which is what exact Persian dish had been made in the Thai palace and renamed Musliman or Massaman. And after a lot of research and 2 trips to Iran, well, he thinks he might have found the answer.
I don't know where I read this from. It's from a book or from a document that I read several years ago when I was looking for the root of Massaman. Because when we learn the poem of King Muhammad II, and it's the first dish mentioned instead of the appetizer. This is very odd. And then, okay, we know that it's originally from Sheikh Ahmad, who came to Ayutthaya during King Urai period. But another theory, it came from Malay. That dish that's come from Iran or Persia then, it's called pheasant jan. And pheasant jan that we know, even now, it doesn't look like this. But it has certain elements that could be substituted by certain ingredients here. Pheasant jan had pomegranate juice, probably it's substituted by tamarind juice. Then they use walnut, but ground. They ground the walnut, and then we use peanuts or other types of nuts. And for meat, it's either mutton, sometimes the whole piece, or minced and made into kofta, made into balls like meatballs, lamb or goat or mutton, into that. I had it, and it has I wouldn't say similar taste, but it has certain richness and certain this flavorsome amalgam of flavors that possibly became this. I think if you trace it back, the things that we call curry, of course, in one of your videos came from Iran, Harappa, Pakistan. It has that root.
As a second guest for this meal and to fill in the missing parts of the story, I've invited one of Thailand's top food writers, Chawadi Nualker, a contributor to the Michelin Guide and the author of Real Thai Cooking, a masterpiece of Thai culinary knowledge. She's also, by marriage, a member of the Bunnag family, privy to the funeral books and stories passed down since Sheikh Ahmad himself. Okay, so we have Sheikh Ahmad and we have Massaman Curry. What's the connection?
The Bunnags claim that Massaman came to Thailand courtesy of Sheikh Ahmad. He did not bring Massaman per se, like it did not spring from his head like Athena sprang from Zeus's head, fully formed. He brought the progenitor of that dish, which could very well have been Pheasant. In being made by Thai cooks with Thai ingredients, that dish eventually would be morphed into the Massaman that we eat today.
The first reference to Massaman has, all we know is that it was a dish that was made with beef at the time that was listed in the Verse of Food and Dessert. The first recipe that we know of that was ever written down for Massaman does come from the Bunnag family. Is that correct?
Yes, I believe so. And the recipe not only has cinnamon and star anise in the curry paste, but there's bay leaves, there's cardamom. These are very non-Thai ingredients, and it also included, besides potatoes, raisins. So it was different.
So that story, you brought a book with you.
I did.
What is this?
This is, I believe the recipe is this one. Sorry, it's this one. And this is the recipe that includes the bay leaves, the cardamom, mace, nutmeg, raisins. This is a chicken one. This is a chicken massaman. But I'm not sure if it's the earliest known rendition. I'm sure there are many people who would say, no, that's not correct. So I don't want to put myself out there. But
no, from my research, as limited as my ability to research is, from what I can tell, that is the first.
Yeah,
that seems to be the first recorded recipe ever written that we know of or that survived.
It's great. It has a lot of foreign elements, and it does not taste Thai.
All right, let's go back to the metaphorical courtroom, and to sum up this case, basically it goes like this. A rich Persian merchant named Sheikh Ahmad arrived in Ayutthaya in the late 16th century and gained power in the Siamese court. As he rose in government, he brought over Persian chefs trained in Mughal Indian cuisine, who introduced a curry, maybe fesanjan, which would be adapted to include local ingredients. This would become a royal favorite given the Persian name Musliman, eventually Massaman Curry. The dish would be passed down through his descendants, the Bunnag family, before catching on with the general public after a Bunnag writer published the recipe in a cookbook in 1889. So that's theory number 2. Now let's see if it works. Under this explanation, the Princess Bunrad would have learned Massaman in the palace, not at the old canal. Well, that's actually a lot more logical, as it's hard to imagine a lot of princesses walking around freely in a migrant neighborhood. This explanation would also mean that Malaysian chicken curry might not be related to Massaman at all, but yeah, I mean, they do look similar, but no more than 1,000 other chicken curry dishes from around the world. And as for the fact that Massaman curry is so ubiquitous in Thailand's far south, well, yes, that's true, but we have no idea how long that's actually been the case, because there are no surviving records of the food of old Patani at all. Massaman might have come from there, but it could have just as easily arrived from Bangkok after the Siamese takeover. So, case closed. Or not. The biggest problem with this theory is, of course, the fact that the first mentions of the Bunnags and Massaman curry shows up in the 19th century, almost 300 years after the dish supposedly arrived with Sheikh Ahmad. Then there's the story of the Persian chefs in Urai the Great's kitchen, which relies only on one single letter as evidence. And even if it was true, well, Urai the Great didn't just love Persian food, he loved all food, as he famously employed chefs from China, India, Cambodia, Indonesia, Europe, and the Arab world. And there's the name, Massaman Curry, which might not be as cut and dry as it seems. Let me ask you, does it really make sense that the Thais would call a dish Muslim curry, but not use the Thai word for Muslim? Why would they use Persian? Okay, so maybe you would say it was the Persian chefs who gave the dish its name, but then why would they call it Muslim curry? Who names a food after their religion? But still, the name has to matter. I mean, Massaman isn't Thai, it's not Malay, it probably isn't Persian, so maybe if we can figure out where that word comes from, that'll finally clear up the mystery of this dish. And that brings us to theory number 3. All right, if I asked you to name the longest-lasting empire in the history of Southeast Asia, who would you guess that was? Well, you might not know about them today, but it was, by a wide margin, the Champa Kingdom. Ruling over the southern part of what's now Vietnam, the Chams built their dynasty in the days of Julius Caesar, and their last strongholds wouldn't fall until the Industrial Revolution. The Chams were massively influential, a matriarchal society known for advanced sailing and silk weaving, and the linchpin of trade between China and India. As a matter of fact, they were the first in mainland Southeast Asia to build ties with India, converting to Hinduism and using Indian techniques in their cooking. As a matter of fact, it's there around the Mekong Delta where we find the very first evidence of curry ever discovered outside the Indian subcontinent, at a site almost 2,000 years old. Anyway, in the interest of moving this along, we'll pick this up around the 15th century when the Champa Kingdom was under siege from the upstart Vietnamese Le dynasty. As much of Champa territory fell into enemy hands, vast numbers fled abroad, arriving in Malacca where they would convert en masse to Islam. When Malacca fell, and as we already mentioned, Islam was outlawed, the Chams would fan out to Johor, Patani, and Cambodia, where they'd eventually establish a new Champa outpost, one that would swell to hundreds of thousands as more Chams left Vietnam. Now, Cambodia in the late 15th century was a mess, ravaged and destroyed after the fall of the Khmer Empire and the site of constant battles between European colonists, Vietnamese, and Siamese forces. And the Cambodian Chams, well, they allied with Siam. As a matter of fact, so well regarded were the Chams in that era that after the war, Champa fighters were granted land in Ayutthaya, and one battalion, became the personal guard for King Naresuan the Great. In other words, whenever Naresuan first met Sheikh Ahmad, it's quite likely that he was flanked by Cham soldiers. So alright, what does any of this have to do with Massaman Curry? Well, for that we need to find another old cookbook, in this case written by a Cambodian princess around the year 1960. Not that long ago, but one of the only sources of that country's culinary history that wasn't destroyed by the Khmer Rouge. In that book, she writes of a dish that was brought by Cham Muslims to Cambodia a very long time ago. A dish in Cambodia today called Massaman Curry, which is, for all intents and purposes, Massaman. I mean, literally, it's beef cooked in coconut milk with spices like cardamom, cloves, star anise, and even tamarind. But what's most interesting is that this is estimated to be the same dish recorded hundreds of years earlier, a beef and coconut curry given a Champa name, Massam, meaning essentially to make something with a lot of effort. Massaman Curry. Now here's what else we know. We know that Champa curry has an ancient history using techniques learned directly from India. We know that the Chams by the 16th century were not just in Cambodia, but also Patani, and in the Siamese royal palace. And we know that this might be the only logical explanation for how Massaman Curry might have appeared independently, both in royal Thai kitchens and southern Thailand, and also how it got its name. Now, to test this theory, well, logic would say there should be a third point of entry into Thailand for the dish. We would expect to see something in the country's far east along the Cambodian border, where large numbers of Chams settled when the French colonized that country. Some kind of massaman hidden in the local cuisine of that corner of the country. And of course, that's exactly what we find. And if massaman is the world's best food, well, this might be the world's best style of massaman.
All right, I'm going to talk a little bit quietly because there's still customers eating in the dining room. This is Burapa, which is the sister restaurant of Sri Trat, which you may have seen in our Best Day of Eating in Bangkok video. And the main reason why we chose that place to film in that show 2 years ago is because of this dish, Massaman with durian and chicken, Young Durian. This was insane the first time I ever tried it, and we thought, okay, well, this is a creation of this chef. Then Daria and I took a road trip to the Cambodian border through Chanthaburi and Trat, the durian growing region, and this is a real thing. This is actually a dish that you find sort of in that eastern Thailand region. So Burapa, the sister restaurant of Sri Trat. We came here for this dish. We've been eating all day. I have unbuttoned the jeans and decided to invest in a pair of sweatpants for the next shoot, but always room for this.
This might be my favorite version of Massaman Curry. It's a delicacy served in Thailand's southeast in towns like Chanthaburi and Trat, in the durian-growing regions where, when the fruit is at just the right point in its cycle, the king of fruit is harvested and cooked with the king of curry into a version that takes richness to a whole new level.
This is that Eastern Thai version of Massaman. And, you know, yes, there's the chicken, there's the peanut, there's all those notes, but this, the young durian, you know, if you're in Chanthaburi, for example, they only sell this for a couple months a year. It's just when durian's in season. Here at this restaurant, because I guess, you know, they're able to source durian from a broader region, you can get it year round. I'm just talking. I mean, we've been eating a lot.
All right, there's one last piece of the puzzle that we need to cover before we can climb back out of the rabbit hole and try to figure out what actually happened. If you remember way back in the Sheikh Ahmad section, that dish, Fesan Jan, the dish that was said to be the inspiration for what would become Massaman. In the Patani version of the story, Massaman was, of course, said to be adapted from an Indian curry, and there are actually two common variations of what that might have been. The first sees the dish arriving from the north of India, the seat of the Mughal power, with the most likely analog beef korma, made with very similar aromatics, including the telltale cumin, and with cashews, which we saw today in old-school Massaman. According to that theory, in Patani, the yogurt and ghee of korma was replaced by coconut milk. The other guess is that it might have been a South Indian curry brought by traders from the Malabar coast, something like Kerala beef roast, which makes plenty of use of coconut and, most importantly, is always served with Kerala paratha, which is almost identical to Southern Thai-style roti. All of these possibilities make sense. Any one of those three dishes could conceivably have led to Massaman, and when it comes to the Champa version of the story, well, it gets even more exciting. According to that theory, the dish that would become Cambodian cham Massam was inspired by the Javanese, who we know from archaeology had a large presence in Champa society. Now, the Javanese Majapahit kingdom lasted from the 13th century until right around the time the Cham kingdom started to fall. And their famous curry, most likely originating even earlier in Sumatra, well, that is made by cooking beef in coconut milk, along with spices like cloves, nutmeg, and cardamom. It's called beef rendang, and making it is incredibly time and labor intensive, taking a full day of work. Maybe the reason for the name Massam, as in very hard to make. And also worth pointing out is the fact that CNN did 3 of those best food in the world surveys, with Massaman winning twice, and the other time the honor went to beef rendang. And hey, they might be the same thing. Anyway, rendang today is classically known as a dry curry, but that's just the version from Sumatra. The Javanese style, which spread to places like Malaysia, Singapore, and the southern Philippines, well, that's a little bit more recognizable. Cooked to soft, not firm, almost like a Massaman curry. All right, if you watch this channel regularly, you know my, what's a stronger word than love, adoration for beef rendang. Maybe my favorite food in the world. For me, it's because I have spent so much time in North Sumatra. This is not that. This is a much, let's say, soupier, wetter version of rendang. It's a Malaysian restaurant, specifically Nyonya, which is the Peranakan, sort of straight Malay, Chinese, that style of food, this restaurant. However, the beef rendang here is actually more relevant to the story because supposedly, if we follow the Cham Muslim Cambodian thread, that takes us to the Javanese and their version of rendang. It's complicated, it's convoluted, but that's this entire story has been complicated and convoluted. And then this is a winged bean salad because I just, for now 2 consecutive days of filming, haven't had any vegetables, and my body's starting to shut down. Let's try the rendang. The process of making rendang, and the reason why I think there's some similarity to Massaman, is it starts with coconut. Well, it starts with the curry paste, and the aromatics used to make this and Massaman have a lot of things in common. It's Indonesia, so you have the clove, you have the mace, the nutmeg, the whole bunch of, ginger, garlic, all that stuff. However, then you have the coconut milk or coconut cream. And the whole point of rendang is you cook it until it's dry. If you stop that cooking process a little bit earlier, what you're left with is something that's not that different from Massaman. In fact, interestingly enough, thinking about it, when I cook rendang, I use peanuts in my recipe. It's not a, let's say it's not a widespread version of the dish, but it exists in some of my favorite places in Padang and in parts of Sumatra.
West Sumatra especially, will use peanuts in their rendang. So again, you know, if you take this and you cook it for 5 hours, you might have basically a massaman. If you cook it for 7 hours, you have a rendang. Or faster on a higher temperature, but you know, where's the fun in that?
So who actually created Massaman Curry? It's a question that doesn't have any obvious answer. Each of the three legends has enough supporting evidence to be believed, but not enough to be proven. The Patani story doesn't explain the name Massaman, and it relies on the idea that a Thai princess was spending her days wandering around a migrant worker market. The Sheikh Ahmad version leans only on sources writing 300 years after his death and doesn't provide any real explanation for the popularity of the dish only in the far south. And the Cham story has almost no proof at all and relies pretty much entirely on speculation and guesses. Maybe at the end of the day, what we're left with at the bottom of the rabbit hole is just a dish that has no answers. Something that combines the very best spices and techniques of all these different ethnic groups. The Siamese and Malay, Champa, Javanese, Persian, Indian, and Cambodian. And it's only through all of that mixing and matching, trading and sharing that we end up with what might be the world's best food. So, let's just finish with one more perfect bowl of Massaman Curry. This is Massaman, made with a royal recipe at a place called Ruen Urai, a restaurant in an 1807 house made of teak wood tucked away in central Bangkok. Here, the dish served as the royal Thai version, but in the words of the great chef McDang, there's really no such thing as royal Thai food. It's just Thai food with a nice presentation. In other words, anything served at the palace was probably also eaten somewhere else in the kingdom. We just don't know where.
You know, it's interesting, they serve this with the bread, and that's because, you know, you might look at this and say, well, what's bread doing on the table with Massaman Curry? I don't know, maybe there's a story behind that as a historic component of the dish that I'm not aware of, but in southern Thai food, you see things like this served with satay, you know, and so interestingly enough, a satay is a dish from Indonesia, popular in Malaysia. It's typically a Muslim dish that's served in a halal way. In Thailand, it's mostly made with pork. So it is southern Thai, but that's one of those that's kind of crossed that boundary between, you know, being Malay, Indonesian food and evolving into something that's Thai, and the Thai version of that typically comes with bread, and you use that bread to dip into the peanut sauce. It works with a peanut curry like Massaman. We do have our rice, of course, with it. Chicken, a ton of spices, not very sweet, which I appreciate. I think the biggest difference between this and what you see in the more global presentations of Massaman is just a lot more sugar, a lot more prominent sort of sweetened coconut. In this case, it's not sweet. It almost tastes like an Indian curry, but with those, you know, it's the garam masala, they call that, warming spices. This is very warming. This is like, what did Keith say in our curry video? It tastes like Christmas, you know, and that's the best way I can describe this. It tastes like Christmas. What an amazing, amazing version of Massaman.
And that is the story of Massaman Curry. Who gets credit? Well, who cares? Though I do want to point out that this Royal Thai restaurant actually calls this a southern dish on their menu, so there's that. Anyway, it's possible that one day some new piece of evidence might surface and we'll finally know the real, definitive version of the history of this unique dish. But I almost hope that doesn't happen, because sometimes the journey is a lot more fun than the destination. The the chance to see that map in 3 dimensions, diving headfirst into the stories of people and trade and cultures, and maybe even better, the chance for us to eat beef rendang, Nasi Lemak, and a half dozen versions of Massaman Curry, all in the same video shoot. I mean, come on. Come on. Subscribe to the channel for more from OTR. Thank you so much to everyone who supports us on Patreon. It really helps to keep us going. Find links below to our Patreon and social media, and we'll see you next time. Vegetables. It's been a long time